Christmas 1998. My dad bought it for me on June 19th at my insistence, but then he told me, like, well, we have it now, but I'm not giving it to you.
Yeah.
Christmas, I know.
Welcome to TwinCast Pod. We got a very special pod for you today. We're out here at our sausage fest. We call it Boys Week to our wives. So, yeah, we're a podcast where we pick up an old game, we dust it off, we try to ascertain if it holds up today.
We also turn around in our hands.
Oh, we turn around in our hands. We're doing a more of like a free form conversation here. We got our good friend Zane. He's going to be our expert. Zane is going to be like our Gordon Freeman. He's gonna
Gonna push a cart into a giant magnetic reactor or something.
Yeah. So we're actually talking about a classic first-person shooter from the late '90s, Half-Life. Let's go ahead and let's just jump into the meat of this discussion. Zane, why don't you give us an intro on this game?
Yeah. So Half-Life was a pretty revolutionary. I don't want to say game, but kind of like piece of technology. It actually kind of revolutionized a lot of things about how people thought about games at the time. It was released in 1998, November 19th, which I remember vividly because I received the game for Christmas 1998.
Oh, cool. So you were
Nice.
pretty close to like the ground floor.
Ground floor, absolutely. My father had just bought us a brand new PC at the time, which was a Pentium 2 450 megahertz. Pretty swanky.
A graphics accelerator card in there too?
It did. I don't actually remember which one it had. I'm trying to remember if it actually did or not. I think I may have played it. I think we got a video card later because I remember playing it initially just on like CPU rendering and it sucked.
Yeah.
I think I was able to get my dad to eventually pony up for one, maybe for my birthday that year.
One of
later in
those
June.
voodoo cards or something?
Yeah, it was something like that. I must not have made a huge impression on me because I don't actually remember it, which is kind of funny. I think we'll probably save Half-Life 2 for a different discussion, right?
Yeah.
But I do remember that video card very vividly, which was a Radeon 9800 XT, because it was the one that Valve demoed at E3 when they did their Half-Life 2 demo, and that also made a very big impression on me. But I tend to go off into tangents.
So you started, and it was just the CPU
Yeah.
rendering the graphics, but you eventually got a graphics card.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Did you have much experience with first-person shooters before this game?
I'd had some. I played Doom, Duke Nukem. I didn't really get into Quake at the time because my PC couldn't run it. I mainly played like Doom and Duke Nukem at a friend's house.
So this is going to be like your first like fully like 3D
Yeah.
first-person shooter game. So.
Yeah, I think I played games at other people's houses, and my friend had like a Nintendo 64, and we played GoldenEye, of course, and games like that. So I was pretty familiar with 3D space navigating it, but as far as like a first-person shooter, I came in a little rusty. I picked it up pretty quickly because I spent like every waking hour thinking about it or playing it.
What was your first impression when you booted that bad boy up?
It was amazing. I initially, because of my skill level, I played the training course first, and even the training course was like themed and it had had life to it. The big thing with Half-Life, the reason why I mentioned it was so revolutionary was because it had this whole idea of an actual living space that actually resembled like real life somewhat. GoldenEye also had this, but Half-Life was what really kicked it up to like the next level, and it's kind of like its influences echo all throughout, because before that we had like Doom, right, which is just basically
you're in hell shooting demons.
Yeah, you're
right?
you're in hell, or you're like on this like moon base, and like the geometry makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, can I curse?
Yes, you can curse.
Huge obnoxious beeps.
Yeah. I mean, that could be kind of funny by itself. But yeah, it's just like the geometry didn't make any sense. There were just like giant like weird doorways with like key cards that you put in there. Half-Life was trying to do kind of a thing where it's like, this is kind of a real space. These are like real environments. And then the big thing was the animation system and scripted events, which were not.
And that's what separated it from the other.
That's what really like blew people away, because up until that point, most of the environments were like pretty static in games. You had like Quake, you had Quake 2, you could interact with buttons and doors, but like aside from that, like you didn't really have things interacting with each other.
Yeah, so it's not like a first-person shooter game like Half-Life is, but I know that like Metal Gear Solid came out the same year, and it had a lot of scripted events too. So is it kind of like a simultaneous?
Kind of all came together at that point, and then Half-Life also just had like a really incredible like animation system. You had all these strange creatures like. The blast pit level had this like big weird tentacle thing, and there was like a very famous scripted event where like it busts through a window and it like picks up a guy and like drags him. And seeing like two models interact like that at the time was also like really like whoa.
And it was all in game, right?
It was all in game.
None of it was pre-rendered.
They didn't do any. Like there was no cutscene. You never leave the eyes of Gordon Freeman.
It's first person the whole time. Yeah.
So it was like really immersive too. It was just like oh wow.
So that's Zane's experience with the game. I'm going to throw it over to Clark and ask him what he remembers about first interacting with Half-Life.
Well, I never played through the single player. So all I ever did was when we would go over to our friend Carl's house, we would play the mods. And so playing through like Team Fortress and just the regular deathmatch. And I don't think we played it quite as much as some of the Quake mods and variants, but I do remember playing through this, and so this is why I'm kind of excited to talk to Zane about it, because I know this was very, very influential, but my experience around it's very limited to that slice, just those mods that we would play with Carl.
Yeah, and I know, T, you don't have hardly any experience at all with Half-Life. Do you have any memory of this game?
No, Half-Life 1, no. I mean, when I first started playing computer games, I got Half-Life 2, Portal, just classic Valve stuff, and so I never stepped back further than that.
You started with 2.
But I was so my initial impression of the single player was just this morning watching a couple of you guys play through it. But I was immediately kind of taken by something about how Valve makes their games makes it very timeless. Like it looks fluid still. Like obviously the graphics are dated. And some of the textures are a little flat, but like
we've got the scientists. So we were pointing out they don't have fingers. They're just like punching.
They're punching the buttons.
But nevertheless, like I was like, this is a recognizable like that. Like the genealogy from Half-Life to Portal 2, like you can see it throughout. And so I was immediately impressed by how it seemed to be still very relevant.
Yeah.
So is this kind of the genesis of Valve? Like, did they do things before this?
No, this was like Valve's first game, and they kind of like blew everyone out of the water.
Yeah.
And like they came together to make this game. Like this is what brought them together.
And I can't think of the other founder's name. They formed the company. They were both ex-Microsoft employees. They'd worked with like some games with under Microsoft, and they, for whatever reason, were unhappy there. They thought they could go in a better direction. They formed this team. They originally they coded like Half-Life almost entirely. They were like almost going to release it, I think. I may have some of the, and with all of this, I may have some of the lore wrong, but they almost released the game, and then they got to the end, like near the end of the development process, and they were like, this kind of sucks.
Oh, really?
They were like, there were a lot of problems with it. Like they couldn't quite like figure out how to do some things. Like the original, it's actually really funny. The original model for Gordon, they call Ivan the Space Biker. He's this like huge dude with like a giant beard and like a weird like crop cut, and he's wearing this like big bulky like environment suit thing. And I think that gives like, I don't know if anyone's ever actually played like the pre-release build of, like that build of Half-Life, but it clearly like wasn't the direction they wanted to go. But they learned a lot of lessons from that. And then Gabe and his co-founder and the rest of the investors had enough of a buffer that they were just like, if we're gonna do this thing, let's do it right. So they went back to scratch and they just like redesigned it. They kept a lot of like assets and they kept a lot of like maybe some of the level designs and stuff like that, but they reworked it and they wanted it to be this like this big thing. They wanted to make a splash, and they certainly did.
Yeah, they certainly did. It was Game of the Year, and it was huge. And we know Valve is huge today, but although they don't make very many games anymore.
We can get into that. But.
Yeah, I was actually. Oh, I am curious. I wanted to know at what point did Valve transition from making games into just
being a storefront.
Well, I mean, they brought that storefront out for
Counter-Strike primarily.
For Counter-Strike. Well, I remember Half-Life 2 kind of being like the one where everyone was freaking out that they had to download Steam and get it through Steam.
You're right. I think they had implemented some sort of. It may have been with Counter-Strike, because they needed basically a way to like update all the servers and update all this information like from a local source, or a distributed source, I should say. So I think maybe they put the infrastructure in place for it first, and then they were like, okay, well, this is ready for prime time, and they released Half-Life 2 with it, and that was a big push that got everyone to use it.
Yeah.
But people were very upset about that.
Oh, I remember people being pissed. Yeah.
Well, let's move it back to Half-Life a little bit here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience playing Half-Life. Clark and I, we had like a Packard Bell PC. It wasn't very good, but we pooled our money together and we got a Voodoo graphics card, so we could actually play somewhat okay. And I remember I played through this single-player game back then, and the thing that stood out to me was how they told the story. It was mostly storytelling that grabbed and pulled me in. And I think it has a lot to do with those pre-scripted events. Yeah. And then something that I would like to talk about now is the silent protagonist and the choice. And that's kind of what Valve did throughout most of their games. So why don't you talk a little bit about that choice and the silent protagonist and Gordon Freeman?
So the whole idea behind it was they wanted people to like really inhabit the character. And again, that's why, they made a decision to never have any like events that took place outside of your perspective. So I think the original idea was basically you give your own voice. Like you think about, there's actually a really funny YouTube series. It's called I can't remember. It's Mind of Freeman, I think. Yeah, Mind of Freeman, where a guy plays like Half-Life 2 and then he narrates what he thinks Gordon Freeman's actually thinking at the time.
Oh, cool.
It's actually like really entertaining. But yeah, like it's basically the whole idea that you're interacting with these things. They want you to decide like how the story works, kind of. They want to they use environmental storytelling, and they use when you actually are talking with the characters and stuff. But they want you to kind of fill in the gaps.
Well, I remember when I was playing, I booted it up this morning and started from the beginning, and I was running around, and I have the 2025 impatient, like, let's move it along here. And Zane's like, hey, you just got to go talk to those dudes over there. And, like, you got to move the story along. I'm like, oh, man, I have this dad ADHD where I can only sit down and play video games for 20 minutes at a time now.
This was after restarting the game like 5 times as well.
Yes. Trying to get it set up.
The intro sequence, again, was also, like, pretty revolutionary because it had just so many scripted events. They really, were like, we're going to show this thing off. We're going to show what we can do. We're also going to make the players wait a solid 15, 20 minutes before anything really happens.
Yeah.
I mean, things happen, like you're taking this tram right through the facility, but it also gives you a sense of scale for how large this facility is and maybe where you're going to go later and the things you're going to interact with. Like you see some stuff there. There's the G-Man on the other tram that passes you at one point. You start to see this guy in the background of the different scenes.
Yeah, he was in one room at one point.
Yeah, he's behind the glass. I actually was
you pointed that out
to him. You need to go look through this window.
So my memory of that G-Man is just, I remember at the end of the game, the first time I played it, he's there at the trap. Well, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but he's there. And then when you start Half-Life 2, he's right there too in the tram too. So, man.
I mean, it's in stark contrast to all of the other first-person shooters. Like, how long does it take till you kill something when you boot up Quake?
2 seconds.
Yeah, 2 seconons.
I think something's firing at you when you start. Well, I'm mostly familiar with Quake 2. I actually didn't really play Quake 1 that much, but I remember when you get into Quake 2, you literally your drop pod is crashed through a ceiling, and there's a guy shooting at you, and you fire back.
Yeah, and so I think it's an interesting decision, like you said, to wait 20, 25 minutes or whatever until you're actually doing something.
Well, even when the enemies first appear, you have a crowbar.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you have. And so you have to whack the head crabs with the crowbar.
It's very much intentional pacing, and I also think probably back then it was people were blown away that you could even do this stuff.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have to talk to these scientists, people were you can talk to the scientists. It was actually oh cool. I want to find out what these guys have to say, and it was also full voice and full that was the other thing before Half-Life. Maybe you can remind me of GoldenEye, but when people talk. Their mouths actually move.
There's no talking.
There's none of that in GoldenEye.
No talking.
I don't even know if you can clearly distinguish a mouth in GoldenEye. Now I'm trying to think of that.
But yeah, they had it synchronized. Again, that was an animation system. They had a dynamic animation system where, when people talk, they actually figured out let's figure out the waveform and let's make their mouths flap in the same manner as they're talking. And then also they had this whole thing like where the upper body was animated independently of the bottom body, and it was all done like through this weird like skeletal. It was a skeletal system actually, is what it was.
Oh, cool.
So you could have these complex animations that were actually independent of each other. So like in we were playing like deathmatch and stuff. We were playing Team Fortress Classic, and like you'll notice like when guys like rotate to the left or right, their legs operate separately from that. So like as they're moving, like they're looking.
Oh yeah.
Previous games, like the entire model would like
Yeah, like
rotate
spin
on.
around, and rotate.
Stuff like that,
Yeah, that's something that I probably just take for granted now because it's something. But this is one of the first games to do that, and wow, that's pretty interesting. Trevor, I want you to talk a little bit more about what your impressions were when I was playing through the intro this morning.
My initial impression was just how cinematic it was, despite its age. I mean, it's almost a 30-year-old game now, right? Like 2 years shy or so.
Oh God.
And it's okay, man. But it was still cinematic. Like I said, like you're just taken immediately with this world, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. He's on this tram. Like I was very curious as to what would happen next. I do think it's interesting though because I mean, like we've already talked about, like this is a totally different track than like modern first-person shooters, and I mean we obviously like this game was influential, but do you feel like do we see remnants of Half-Life anymore in games, like, or has Call of Duty and all of its Call of Duty-ness taken over first-person shooters?
I don't play a lot of modern first-person shooters, so I don't.
Probably part of it is because a lot of it's Call of Duty.
A lot of you have Call of Duty, and then you have like the hero shooters that it's like Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, and
there just aren't very many single player
like
first-person shooters anymore.
like story driven.
Yeah, like the new Doom.
The new Doom just came out.
It just came out, which looks really
Is that
cool.
story driven?
Well, again, like
it doesn't look like it is.
It's more like Doom.
Yeah.
So it's not going to tell a huge grand.
Yeah, maybe we've done like a full,
You're just
like
gotta
a full circle.
Yeah.
Whole thing.
I mean, how long has it been since Half-Life Alyx came out? It's been like
it came out
8 years ago.
5 years. It came out in 2020.
2020.
I know
Okay.
because I saved up a lot of money for that thing.
There's the Metro series, if you guys have ever played that, and I think it takes a lot of pages from this book. It's a silent protagonist, very story driven, a lot of times slow burn, mix of like horror, interesting environments. I would say, in my experience of first person shooters, that would probably be the closest
DNA to like a modern game
that's
that's
tracking on the track that Half-Life started. And so back to the silent protagonist thing. It's an interesting story choice, and in some ways, I mean, we were talking about it this morning. I think it's really cool, and it's I mean, you have to be committed to do that. I think in some ways I've found that it takes me out of the story sometimes. Like they're interacting with the protagonist, and the protagonist never talks back. But I think it's interesting, and the Metro series I think would be close.
There probably was like a number of like different like decisions that came into that. There's also probably like we only have so much audio space. Like,
technical limitations.
Technical limitations may have also played a part in that, where it's like, well, how much of his dialogue can we record? Like how much like figuring out these like key points where he would say things or wouldn't say. This is pure speculation on my part.
Well, that's a good point, though. Yeah.
Another thing is you almost never see Gordon himself, his character model and stuff.
I'm not even sure if you see him.
Do you see him in the game? I know he's on the box.
Are there any mirrors or something?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely no mirrors. No, that was not a technology.
Because I do know in in Portal you do see Chell through reflections and stuff like that. But do you ever? You never really see Gordon.
I think there might be a scene where like you see him through a portal, where it's like a portal, kind of like the portals, and I'm not sure. Like I seem to. Oh, you know what it is. I was thinking like, you see him in the Zen sequence when he like jumps into the portal. That's actually from the expansion Opposing Force, where you play as one of the soldiers. You actually see Gordon jump into the portal at that point. I'm not sure if you really see him actually, but you definitely see him in the deathmatch. So like what it looks like there.
So his model is there. You just don't see it in the game.
He has like a crop cut with like a little ponytail, which is really funny because it's just not there in Half-Life 2. I guess like while he was in stasis, they like lopped it off or something.
Yeah.
But,
quite a bit different than the protagonist you're used to seeing in these kind of games, right? Because you're a scientist.
Yeah.
And
you're a scientist. You do lots of science.
Well,
like I said, they make a joke about that in Half-Life 2. Actually, it was like putting that like PhD to use, right?
Yeah. I remember you were telling me about in the game. We can talk a little bit about the physics here. Yeah, you can jump and then crouch, and you can mess with these physics and stuff. And I'm like, Gordon Freeman's good at physics, right? Because he's a theoretical theoretical physicist.
Yeah.
So he knows how to manipulate all these physics. That's his superpower.
Well, I mean, that's certainly true of Half-Life 2. That was the whole big thing with Half-Life 2. We are not going to get into the whole thing, but the physics for that game was like holy shit.
Yeah,
But
that's crazy.
But that is a
Gravity
funny
gun
point.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, before we get too far into talking about the actual story and gameplay within the story, why don't we go ahead and take a break now, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about the actual story and what's going on. We're back from our break, and we're going to talk a little bit about the story and what's going on here.
Yeah.
So, what's going on with Gordon and his daily commute to work?
What is going on with Gordon? So he wakes up late. He's just been hired. There's actually like an interesting little like overlay on the screen as you go through the tram ride. It kind of gives you like a synopsis of like who Gordon is, and that's kind of like the one thing where it's like, oh, this isn't like directly in the story, but it kind of makes sense later.
One thing that stood out to me is that he said he was 27 years old.
27 years
And
old.
I'm like, oh man, I'm
a-
way
what a
older
little
than
kid.
Gordon now.
You're like, wow, I can't wait to be that old someday. Yeah, when I played this, I was like 13. So, again, I was very influential. But yeah, so Gordon, he's late. It's his very first day. He's just been hired. Hops on the train through the facility, gets there. You know, everyone's like, oh, you're late, you're late. He has to be down in this test chamber where this experiment's going to happen. This is his very first day. It's kind of crazy. Really terrible way to start off your career, I think. But yeah, he gets there. Do you want me to go through the whole plot? Or?
You know, just give it like a brief like synopsis on what's going on. So,
Okay. So he gets there. They have this crazy crystal that they need to analyze through this giant anti-mass spectrometer, whatever that is. And it's this like massive. It's obviously Black Mesa is a massive facility, but it's this like massive room. You get down there, you talk to some scientists, they brief you kind of on like what's going on. You flip some buttons and you push a cart into this big machine, and suddenly shit goes haywire. You know, get away from the beam. Like a big beam goes into the control center and like blows up, and like suddenly you're teleported to this weird alien world. You see like some crazy shit. You come back, the facility's like falling apart. Battle your way through there, talking to scientists, like killing all these weird alien creatures.
so this is your first day at work.
Yeah.
How long had they been there? And then, is it just a coincidence that it happened on your first day? Are you?
I don't know. Well, that's what I kind of mentioned about the overlay is actually like, it turns out you're kind of being analyzed. Gordon's being analyzed as like a potential candidate for something strange.
What?
That's kind of like the secret, like, backstory behind it, because that's kind of what the G-Man's doing, and that's why he, at the end, I mean, we can get into spoilers, I guess, if you want, but...
It is a 30-year-old
30-year-old game.
so-
I
You
think
can
we
spoil it.
Yeah, so the G-Man's kind of like, at least my understanding of it, is he is a trans-dimensional, temporal being, and he happens to know this particular sequence of events happens, and he wants to like basically analyze to see if Gordon's like a suitable candidate for his employer, which still is not explained. Who knows whether it'll be explained? Because, well, yeah, again, that's getting too far into the future. Let's focus on Half-Life 1. And yeah, like you go through this whole thing. You get to the whole time, like you're battling all these aliens. People are like, oh, we need to get to the surface. You get to the surface. Turns out the help you thought was arriving is actually there to eliminate you. It's a government cover-up. They send in all
Government
these
cover-up, yeah.
soldiers to kill up the entire science team. And nuke the facility, it turns out, actually. And that happens in, again, that expansion pack, opposing force. And then, yeah, like you have to launch a satellite. There's like some weird coordinates that the Lambda team needs in order to create a new portal to Zen so that they can send Gordon through in order to defeat the alien intelligence, which is sending all this stuff through and trying to destroy Earth. This big, like, weird baby creature that you fight at the end called Nihilanth.
Yeah.
That's during the whole like Zen part, which everyone hates, which I liked it okay, but yeah.
Yeah. So as a 13-year-old, how much of this story like matter to you when you first played it?
I loved it. I loved everything.
Were you like poring over it?
Yeah, like I had like the instruction manual and I was like studying it, and inside the instruction manual is like a little page that's like Gordon's like offer letter was in there.
Oh,
I was like,
cool.
oh, this is interesting.
Man, I love that stuff. I wish we still got that kind of
know.
stuff in games today.
I remember like Warcraft 2 manual had like, a lot of cool illustrations of orcs, and I remember like in my notebook at school I would like copy like the illustrations. And Half-Life 2 or Half-Life had the same thing. Like in their book they had like sketchings of like the maps and stuff. And
I don't think we had that. I think we probably had some sort of like burned copy of it or something. Yeah.
I'm sure Carl burned us a copy.
Yeah.
it was just like an official backup copy, right?
See, I would have been 16 when I was playing this game, and I was kind of just. I was like your basic 16-year-old. I'm like girls, and I played the game. I had cool guns and aliens and stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't really grok the whole story, and it's kind of hard to actually, unless you're really paying attention. And if you're just like blowing through things, you can miss a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah. There's tons of little bits and pieces of environmental storytelling. Like I pointed out, like press the button underneath the guard's desk, and like an alarm goes off, and like the little touches
attention
like
to detail that you see in their later games too.
Oh yeah, big time. But yeah, like I definitely dove into it. I was like a huge sci-fi nerd. Like I still am like a huge Star Trek nerd, stuff like that. So I really love like weird stories like that, and also like Half-Life definitely like just carries. It has all of its influences on its sleeve, right?
Yeah.
The head crabs are just face huggers. Like, straight up, they're just face huggers. It's actually really interesting. There was a movie in 1996 called The Arrival, which I don't know if it's ever been confirmed that was like a huge influence on Half-Life, but it's basically the story of Half-Life, and Charlie Sheen in it looks like a lot like Gordon Freeman. So I don't know. But yeah, Mark Laidlaw is also like a sci-fi writer. Before that, I still haven't read any of his books, but he's like pretty well established, and they have the bona fides to really dive into that type of storytelling. And then Valve had a very unique approach to do it all through environmental.
So the dude that wrote the story, he was a sci-fi author before that.
Yeah, inside Gordon's locker in the game. There's two books that are Mark Laidlaw's like previous two books.
Yeah, and that's as you were pointing out stuff as Cam was playing through and all, just like the little attention to detail stuff. Obviously a labor of love.
Well, and I remember going back and replaying that game maybe 5 or 6 years later, and I did notice those attention to details. I think I played it again after I had played Half-Life 2 to try to figure out more of the story, because the story is very intriguing. There's something about like, hey, you need to work a little bit here, and you need to try to put things together yourself. And then I remember just speculating, and then finishing Half-Life 1, and then doing 2 again, and then doing 2's expansions, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And like, I don't know. We won't get too much into 2. But
I want to ask Zane, like, how does the fun of the gameplay compare with the story? Is it one of those games where you're just like shooting down a hallway, waiting to get to the next like story sequence, and that's what kept you going, or was it opposite? Like you were like you loved the gunplay, you loved going through it, and then the story sequence would bring it down, or was it kind of equal on both?
It was like equal, like hand in hand. Like they both definitely like influence each other, because again, like the storytelling all made it feel like a very real world. So it was very immersive, and it just kind of like gave you a little bit of stakes. You wanted to help your scientist buddies, and you wanted to make it through and see what the next environment was going to throw at you.
And how difficult was it when you were 13 years old?
I played it on medium originally, and then every time I replayed it, I always played it on hard because I wanted the challenge. And then also like the combat at the time was also like incredible, especially like when you get to the surface and you have these crazy soldiers that actually communicate with one another, and they have flanking tactics, and they actually call things out, and that was also like super revolutionary at the time.
I remember playing when I played that. That was the most difficult part for me, was getting onto the surface and trying to deal with those soldiers, because they were much different than the aliens that you had fought before. So
yeah, definitely, and the fact that they communicated at all, and if you pay attention, they'll call things out. They'll be like, they had like a whole like voice system, and they actually reacted to things, which was pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, I mean, it's a revolutionary game, and it takes cues from science fiction and stuff like that. But ultimately, I'd like to hear from Zane about how this game has affected your your life. I know you've mentioned before this has been very influential on you. So why don't you go ahead and tell your story here?
Extremely influential, yeah. Like I said, I got it for Christmas 1998. My dad bought it for me on June 19th at my insistence, but then he told me, like, well, we have it now, but I'm not giving it to you.
Oh, you
Christmas, I know.
You had to wait like a whole 6 months to play it?
No, November to
November.
I thought you
sorry,
said
not for my
June.
birthday. I made
Okay.
his birthday.
Okay, yeah.
Made me wait till Christmas.
Still, that
Yeah,
must have been
and
painful.
like I don't know why he did this to me, but he didn't even like wrap it.
Did he like install it on your computer and
He
say
didn't
boot up?
install it.
Oh.
No. He just was like, "You're not taking it out of the box until then," because I had just been hounding him about it, and I think he thought like this was like I don't know some way to get back at me for doing it. But I just remember poring over the box over and over again. It was like, well, it was old school like big boxes with like the flap on the front
big
and
boxes
all
were
that stuff.
awesome. I
But then
love
also
those.
on the computer, when I was on the computer, I did nothing but like read Planet Half-Life and like read all about it and be like, oh, this is gonna be so cool, and, like feeling left out. Eventually, I think he like caved and like let me install like a week before Christmas.
Oh,
because I was
so-
just
okay.
bugging the hell out of him about it. But yeah, it had a huge impact on my life. It had a map editor like on the disc, which I believe was called Worldcraft at the time. They later renamed it to Hammer. I got really into that. Like I said, I got really into the whole Half-Life community. There was a map.
So would you
site.
make your own like multiplayer maps?
Yeah, I did. I got really into it. I think I released like one, but I spent a lot of time just like figuring out how the like brush geometry worked and like how to create these like little worlds, and there was like a really influential site on Planet Half-Life. Planet Half-Life was like built on like other little sites that were hosted underneath it called Radium, where it had like a really active forum on there, run by this guy named Radium. Well, his not run his real name obviously, but he had like a really like strict like review system. It was a review site for all these maps. So like people would submit maps to him. He would do like a really thorough review, and then he never gave out a 10. Like he was always like 10 was like the upper end that would never be achieved, but you can get like a really high like 9. And yeah, it had this crazy forum, which I got really into. That same forum software, it was a version of PHP BB, I think. Radium had like customized like the crap out of it. He had all these features. Planet Half-Life was on the GameSpy network. One of the original editors of GameSpy was Lotax. Lotax was active on Radium's forum. The same software that powered Radium's forum powered Something Awful's forum. Something Awful being like its whole, terrible legacy that it has. But it was also like a big part of like my adolescence was like that forum and like interacting with people in this whole like online community and like all this crazy stuff. But yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about this like tiny little like forum that I was on back on Planet Half-Life later became Something Awful, which later became like 4G.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it was like your whole life almost at that point, right?
Oh yeah. And then like I spent all this time like mapping. I spent all this time goofing off in class. Drawing maps on graph paper and not paying attention.
Nice.
Failed all these math classes, which I find
Worth
really
it.
Worth it.
Yeah.
But I became really invested in like game development and figuring out how to do like some really basic programming. I ended up like later taking AP Computer Science, and then later I became a software engineer. And it kind of was all on this trajectory of like learning how to like modify this weird like game that I was obsessed with back when I was like 13. So. Yeah.
So out of all the video game influences in your life, this is by far the greatest one.
I mean, I have like a little Lambda. Like,
Here, hold it up to the camera so people can see it. Yeah.
you have to zoom in or something. Yeah. I have a little Lambda like tattoo on my finger here, and I have like a pie on the other one. And I just thought it'd be funny to get like people get like little like letters on their knuckles, and I have a bunch of tattoos, and I was like, it'd be funny if I had like some Greek symbols on there, and like the secret Greek symbol for this one would be like my Half-Life influence.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that your experience is awesome, and a lot of people have similar experiences with other games too. So, thanks for sharing that, and that's awesome. Now, we usually give like a grade score of the games that we play. It's been a long time since I've played through the whole multi, so I think we're just going to abstain from.
I mean, we can. I don't feel equipped to give a score here, but Zane, just like objectively, if you were to recommend or not like someone
play it today.
Let's say someone from Gen Z,
Yeah.
they come up to you and say, "Should I play this game?" What are you going to tell them?
100,000%. It's like, recommending like a classic piece of literature for me. It's like, all the stuff that you like appreciate now is all built on like the foundations of like these things that came before. So if they are of a mind where they would appreciate it, I would absolutely say like check that out, because it also has a legacy through like Counter-Strike, Team Fortress,
Yes.
Half-Life 2, all the stuff that spawned out of Half-Life 2.
My favorite game probably of all time, Portal 2.
Portal, yes, of
Yeah.
course, Portal.
Portal, yeah. There are different ways to play this. Would you recommend just the basic game, or there's also like Black Mesa, and there's...
I have not really played Black Mesa, actually, oddly. I just haven't really gotten around to it. It's not
So you
because
just
I don't
think
want to.
vanilla is the way that you would point people
I
to
just
go?
check it out, like see how it goes. Like if you find it interesting, but like maybe the older graphics and stuff are holding you back, definitely check out Black Mesa. That's like a labor of love. That game was discussed.
That's like a community game, right?
It's a community game.
Yeah.
As soon as Half-Life 2 came out, people were like, "Oh, we should like because Valve did do like a Half-Life Source." But it was just basically the exact same game, just in the Source engine.
In the Source
they just
engine.
ported all the geometry over to it. And then people were like, "Oh, we should make this like, we should go back and like create a new version of." And that was literally from like 2004 when Half-Life 2 came out, and they eventually ended up actually releasing it.
It was
in like 2019 or something
yeah,
like that.
it was much later.
I remember actually applying to the Black Mesa team. I was like, I could like, but I didn't have the time at the time. But I was like, I have some mapping skills. I could contribute something.
Yeah.
It was just all volunteer.
Yeah, it was just
Yeah,
entirely
that's cool.
volunteer. They ended up actually
Labor of
forming
love.
a company and getting money for it.
I've actually played through most of it. I mentioned to you guys, I got to the point where I got to the surface and started fighting the
grunts.
soldiers and grunts, and it got too hard. It was too hard for me, and I was like, okay, I'm done here. But it's fun. It's a fun updated version of the game. But I would say this game it's what, $10? It's $10 on Steam, and then there's a lot of ways you can just get it for free.
Yeah,
it's
Valve
like
likes to bundle it with other stuff that they sell. If you wait around long enough, if you buy some other game, it'll just come with Half-Life attached to it. So.
that would be my recommendation too. Is if you want to get a good sense of first-person shooter history, this is like the next in the line from Quake to Half-Life, and Half-Life is huge when it comes to storytelling in first-person shooter games, and the way they presented it is even today it still holds up. Yeah.
I certainly would say so.
Yeah. What do you think, T?
Yeah. Like I said, like I had nothing but good things to say, despite the aged graphics. Like the gameplay still seemed relevant. The physics engine was adequate. Obviously, like I think Source engine now is way better. But yeah, I love all of Valve's works, and it is unfortunate that they've gone away from making video games. And maybe the obligatory question that we have to ask is, will we ever see Half-Life 3?
Yeah. Why don't we we'll tie up our conversation here and we'll just mention Half-Life 3 and what Zane's, what are your thoughts on Half-Life 3?
Is it more than a meme at this point?
Yeah, is it ever going to happen?
If it does happen, it won't be in any sort of form that would be recognizable.
Yeah.
I've become very disillusioned with Valve, I will say.
What was even their last game?
Half-Life
Well, I mean,
Alyx.
Alex?
Well, they
I
continue
will say.
to work on like Dota 2 and those kind of like Counter-Strike.
I guess they keep up Team Fortress 2.
Counter-Strike
and-
2, I think, came out
the
like...
last like big one for me that I would like qualify as like a classic Valve game though would be Portal 2.
Portal 2, yeah.
Portal 2 was like really where.
So you wouldn't even count Half-Life Alyx then?
No, I mean like as like there was like classic Valve and new Valve, and like,
Yeah.
I actually loved Half-Life Alyx. Maybe we can talk about like Half-Life 2 and Half-Life Alyx next year. It's also
Yeah.
next or something. I actually like thought Alyx was incredible, and they did like an incredible job. It was like an incredible like.
But
homage
you have a
and,
hard
love letter
split
to it.
after Portal 2.
Yeah, Half-Life 2 or Portal 2, I feel like was really where like the original team was all together, and like they really like it's just classic Valve. It's hard to really like encapsulate that better, but it just feels like that's where things shifted towards just like we're gonna lay back in the cut. We're gonna like it was actually right around the time where like they really started to monetize like cosmetics and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I remember like that was
You got
maybe
the
that's-
hats.
He had hats in Portal too, and like,
Yeah, that's
that was right after. They
Why do we
introduced hats in
spend
TF2.
all of this like millions of dollars developing a game when we can just let other people develop the games and we can take a cut of what they do?
Well, I think we're gonna talk about mods here in a minute. That's actually been like Valve's ethos for a long time was like engaging the community, giving the community ways to contribute to their games. Like we'll get into it with the mods discussion, which I think is a natural way to get into that.
So yeah, we'll transition to the mod discussion now. Welcome back. Carl has appeared.
Hi, everyone.
He's been on the podcast before, but we reference him like every other podcast because he's like one of the most influential person in our lives around our taste of video games, and a lot of it is actually from, games like Half-Life.
This era of games, specifically when it comes to PC gaming, Carl's was our gateway drug into that. So,
Wow.
He was our dealer.
and he still is.
The first Carl.
Influential or just manipulative.
Although he's the one he brings us in, he shows us a good time, and then just owns us.
It was pretty merciless in our early days. I was just happy to play.
Yeah.
So
Didn't know how to hold back.
We've been talking about Half-Life, and now we're to the part of the discussion where it comes into the mods of Half-Life and how big they were in our gaming. Why don't you talk about the mod scene in Half-Life?
Man, so it kind of was an outgrowth of the mod scene from the games that came before it, like Quake. Mm-hmm. There were people out there like, oh, it's got to be moddable, and we've got ideas, and yeah, mods were just kind of, they were on this exponential upswing by the time Half-Life came out.
And so they shipped the game with that in mind, is what you're saying. Like they knew that like we're putting this game out there. We want to make it easy for people to like make their own thing out of it.
And to some degree, I'm not sure how much they planned around it, because it was the Quake engine with their modifications to it. It was still very moddable like Quake was, and I think they also knew that the community had an expectation. Like, yeah, we better be able to make maps and mods for this game, just like we did for Quake. And so they couldn't very well ignore it, but as they were making it, what they really had on their plate was this giant single-player game. So I'm not sure how much they just inherited and ran with versus like, okay, we got to be. Though Valve was always, in the early days of Half-Life, had their mind towards multiplayer. Mm-hmm. By the time TFC came out, which is what we were playing, technically a Half-Life mod, they were trying all sorts of things to make internet play better for people.
Yeah.
I
was a hyping bastard.
So was I.
Yeah.
300 ping, trying to defend
was like
well.
800. It was disgusting.
On your 56K modem or
56K
whatever.
modem. It was just like it was the worst. And then eventually Valve released this updated netcode, which is very controversial, but it actually had like hit scan based on the original client PC that then like had some cross-checking with the server to see if that would actually be valid at that point, and then it would actually award it. So people were getting like snapbacks from these like big like hyping bastards like me, but it actually made it so I could play sniper a little bit.
So how much of a step up was the mod scene here from what you saw with Quake? Was it like revolutionary, or was it basically the same sort of thing?
Yeah, we should say it's revolutionary because Half-Life was where Counter-Strike was a mod.
Yeah,
And
Counter-Strike was huge.
Everyone knows Counter-Strike now.
Still one of the biggest games out there today.
You guys have heard of Counter-Strike, right?
Well, Counter-Strike 2 just came out like a couple years ago.
Yeah, and then before that it was Global Operations.
Gee.
CS Glob is what I
CS
always
Glob.
call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For that CS Go. No,
Well, CS:GO, then CS Source.
Well, that's obviously the
CS
big.
Source, then CSGO.
That was the biggest mod for this game and the most popular
For
mod.
Half-Life.
for
like-
sure.
yeah.
But the one that I would like to talk about a little bit more is the one that you already mentioned.
TFC?
Yeah, Team Fortress Classic, and it was in Quake, but how was it the implementation into
Implementation.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to cut that out. I'm not that.
Cut that one.
Yeah, how was the implementation of Team Fortress into Half-Life compared to Quake?
I can talk a bit about it. I mean, I can't talk about it specifically from Quake, but I can give a little bit more context to it. Where TFC was the very first mod for Half-Life, because it was released by Valve, but it was also released to launch their SDK to the community. Okay. So they released TFC, and they were like, "This is a showcase of what you guys can do with our engine. Like, please go out there and like do some crazy stuff." And they actually hired like the original development team from Team Fortress, Quake Team Fortress, to work on TFC. They actually brought them into Valve, and this was a pattern that Valve repeated again and again and again to great success.
They also did that with Dota, also, right?
They did that with Dota. They did it with Counter-Strike. They did that with Portal. Mm-hmm. Portal was actually originally a
Narbacular
drop, which was from like a gaming school, which I can't remember the name of it now. I should, because I actually applied to that gaming school at one point, that game development school.
Ringling or something. Anyway. It's just
like
Dota is just Warcraft 3.
Yeah. They
Wait, well, shh.
As I say, Dota was originally Warcraft 3, and then Dota 2 was. Valve's like, yoink, we're gonna do that.
Yeah, Valve's whole philosophy is basically to build the infrastructure to allow people to create things that they can take a cut of. Where it's like, we're gonna hire in these like development teams and in-house. We're gonna let them develop these mods for us. We're gonna hire these cosmetic makers to basically hire them. Like, we're gonna give them a cut so they can use our game to create their cosmetics, and we're gonna develop an entire gaming platform called Steam, where people can have the whole infrastructure for that, and they've been very successful.
Yeah.
So which of these mods was your favorite, like, of these Half-Life mods that you like to play the most?
I think it ends up being Counter-Strike. But I played TFC in a clan. It was probably for a summer is all it was, but playing on a modem.
That Rad Clan?
It was Rad Clan. So we were doing Action, Quake 2, and TFC overlapped for a little while. Mm-hmm. And
I remembered Action Quake 2 a lot in our high school
We played
days.
that one a lot more. At least
because we were obsessed. We wanted to play it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Action Quake 2, because the lead developer of Action Quake 2, Gooseman.
He wasn't the lead developer of Action Quake 2. He made the gun models, but he was the lead developer of Counter-Strike.
He later went on to create Counter-Strike. So there's a lot of lineage, there's a lot of heritage behind these mod scenes, especially coming from Quake to Half-Life.
Yeah, I think Counter-Strike became a lot bigger after we were out of high school and we weren't as synced up with you. So we never really got much into Counter-Strike. But
I was actually one of the original testers of Counter-Strike.
Oh, cool.
Beta tester?
Basically. They released a beta. Again, I was very active on Planet Half-Life. I found out about this like new mod that was coming out. It wasn't like an exclusive beta test, but they were basically like on the forums, like they, were like, hey, like we have this like new game, like come test it out with us. And they set up like a handful of servers at the time, and it was a very rough. I remember playing it, and the best bug in it was that the ghosts could activate things in the map, so you could activate doors. So I remember the original playtest, like we're going through and we're running around, and like doors are like it's like poltergeist style, and like things are flying around. Yeah. But yeah, Counter-Strike obviously absolutely massive.
So you're saying that we could have had a better version with ghosts that activating, but you nixed that, huh?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Would you actually say, Counter-Strike's bigger than actual Half-Life, right?
Yeah.
As far,
a lot of people,
is a mod that actually eclipsed at least it has a larger player base today, right?
Yeah. Player base today. You could easily say that. I guess.
It kind of depends on your metrics of
Do
it.
people
By
still
the time
play
CS 1.6 was going, it was the bigger.
And I'm sure, tons of people still play classic Counter-Strike stuff.
Yeah, I think some people still swear by 1.6.
Yeah, and a ton of people had no idea what Half-Life was. They just knew that if they bought this, they got Counter-Strike. I knew plenty of people that like never ever launched the single player.
Is that why we don't see a Half-Life 3? Because you just set the game up, like how much money do they make off of Half-Life, but then ultimately how much money have they made off of Counter-Strike?
Half-Life 3 just suffers from like the weight of its own expectations, and like eventually Mark Laidlaw, the head writer, has left Valve now. He's not even with them. He actually ended up writing like a treatment, basically, that was like some names were changed that basically explained what the plot of Half-Life 3 would have been. maybe they'll pick it up again in the future, do something. I just consider, Half-Life Alyx is all the Half-Life 3 I wanted, and I got a satisfying end to it, and I've been able to put it down.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, we have Gabe sitting on his pile of money from Steam, and I just don't think we'll ever see.
Actually, a friend of mine took a picture of Gabe's yacht, which is actually parked in Vallejo right now, back home.
Yeah.
I came out here from California, but Gabe Newell happens to be on a giant yacht right near our friend Kyle Sessions.
The name of his yacht, Freeman.
I forget what the name was.
Probably the Aurora Borealis.
Tying it all together.
Well, we thank you guys for your input on this classic game. Like I said, I think Half-Life, everyone should pick it up and give it a chance. And if you have a chance to play some of these multiplayer mods, I like Team Fortress more than Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike's just too twitchy for me. I'm not.
Yeah, we didn't mention this, but we played a mod this morning that was not just a Team Fortress Classic mod, but it was a variant where you had to escort like a VIP to a point.
Hunted. For those that knows what we're talking about. It was just part of Team Fortress Classic, actually. And it's not even a special variant. They actually just included that map with the code and everything needed. When that came out, and first time I played that at a LAN party, and the hunted was running around yelling, "Medic, medic!" And we're all just,
I mean, it's pretty cool because it's an example of like an asymmetrical, like multiplayer game.
Well, they took that whole idea behind Hunted and they refined it to make cart pushing. Cart pushing is actually the natural evolution of
payload race, or just payload.
You have to guard this thing, you have to guide it through the map, and they figured out a way to like make it more dynamic so that you're not just like headshotting the hunted like I was doing in the game that we were doing.
And you can kind of see the DNA of that type of thing in like Left 4 Dead when they would do that too, because like you had the two different teams and they had had opposing objectives, and even the makeups of the team were like different, like you didn't have the same weapons and abilities on the separate teams, and so it was asymmetrical and very interesting and balanced around that.
Yeah, and then getting back to Counter-Strike, just to circle back on that real quick, I would say if we talk about Half-Life 2, maybe like next year or something, the big reason why Carl and I are such good friends is because we played an absolutely insane amount of Counter-Strike Source together back in the day.
How good was Carl?
We were all like pretty ridiculous.
We were never.
All I know is that Carl
good enough to be pro or anything.
We weren't pro level, but I remember like
Get away from that, Freeman.
compared to like what I can do today, like man, back in the day, having those twitch reflexes was so sweet.
Well, I mean, it was always like playing with Carl was almost like playing with a god, because we would mostly just play when we would go over to Carl's house, and of course when we weren't there, he was playing all the time too, so he would just mow us down.
Yeah, I could be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, but never a big fish in a big pond.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun in the pubs. So.
Well, if you ever get a hankering to have some old school LAN parties and stuff like that, I would definitely recommend firing this up and trying some of these mods, and it's awesome. So thank you guys for joining our discussion today. Appreciate it.
You.
Okay, and I guess TwinCast is out.
Risk kicking fan favorite handsome Trevor out to replace him.
Risk well taken. You gotta replace a hottie with a hottie.
Yeah.
but I remember like being